our panel members today. First of all, I just want to acknowledge our director, Ms. Ashley Snipes. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm always happy to do events with you, and so thank you. I also want to acknowledge our panel members today, Miss Courtney Smith, Dr. Sonia Pearson, and Miss Rosie Martinez. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll just also like to thank you all for that. I also want to just also acknowledge that being that this is Women's um, March Month, Women's History Month, I want to acknowledge that we are also thankful to celebrate. We're thankful to celebrate our first African American Asian first vice president woman, and I'm so like woo hoo hoo. So if you guys can just, there's a little feature here in the box where if you want to do the little hand clap. I don't know if everybody can see that or not, but I also want to acknowledge that as well because I just recognize that it has been 101 years since the women's suffrage, giving women the right to vote in 1920, and it has been 101 years. So we have our first woman president of the United States after 100 years of voting. So that is an acknowledgement of that. So having said that, I want to acknowledge again our wonderful panel and thank you, women, for joining us. I want to acknowledge Miss Courtney Smith again, Dr. Sonia Pearson, and Miss Rosie Martinez. And I want to just give you ladies the floor to just tell us a little bit about yourselves. So starting off with Courtney.
Sure. Thanks so much, Mona, and thank you all for being here this afternoon, evening. I'm so honored that I was even asked to be a part of this distinguished panel of fine women colleagues here at CSN. I think that we're all very lucky to be able to work with one another and to be examples for our students and for our fellow staff members, and so I'm appreciative. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, my professional background, and a little bit of my personal background as well. I feel really fortunate to have been working in higher education for my entire career, and so if there's students in the panel who are on the call who are kind of thinking, oh, what kind of field am I looking at? I don't know anything other than higher education as a professional. Of course, I've had other jobs previous to this, but the benefits and the joys that you get in working with students is unparalleled and unable to be matched. And so just a plug for people who may be thinking about education as a career path in the future. It certainly is worthwhile for sure. I started my career as a teaching assistant when I was working on a master's degree, and I taught classes in the communications department. So I have taught public speaking, which if you had told me that that would ever be in my career path at any point when I was a high school student or even in my early college years, I certainly would have laughed you out the door thinking no way that I could do that. But because of some excellent women mentors who supported me along the way, that was a path that I ended up succeeding in and moving towards. Once I finished doing my master's degree in communication studies, I started working in an admissions office in the Midwest for an institution that I didn't know a lot about when I had first started there, but it quickly occurred to me that that was not going to be a place that I would feel comfortable staying. And so it was a hard decision to kind of only work in my first professional job for about a year. But when your values don't match up with the institution, it made it that much easier to actually leave. My next position after that, I actually stayed with that college for about 13 years. And so I feel like my career path was led to that way. I worked in that role at that college for 13 years, as I mentioned, as an admissions counselor, and then as an academic advisor to student athletes, and then as an assistant director of the Learning Center there, and then eventually as the director, while also serving as the Title IX coordinator and teaching communications courses. So I had a lot of all different kinds of duties, and I think a lot of women are also faced with other duties that is assigned and things just kind of coming on board. And so that was a situation at that previous institution. And while I really enjoyed my time there, you don't stay somewhere for 13 years without enjoying it. You also kind of are able to tell the time to move on. And so that's how I journeyed over here to the College of Southern Nevada. I've been here for almost 3 years in the role of communications coordinator. I work in the student affairs area, and I support areas like career and transfer services, academic advising, our TRIO student support services program, student life and leadership development, and the first year experience. And so I have a lot of great colleagues that are supporting me as I support them. And that has been a blessing here at CSN to be able to have that kind of professional opportunity to get to know people. Personally, I am married. I've been married successfully for 8 years. And I have a very supporting husband who, when I said, I think it's time for me to move on from my last position, where do we want to go? He said, name the place. He has a work from home position before this pandemic started. And so I was able to seek my own opportunity while with my partner. And that has been an amazing opportunity to have that support of someone in my life. And so I'm thankful to him and as well. And so I'll turn it over to our next panelist. I certainly don't want to monopolize the conversation. We have some really great women here on the panel. And so whomever is next.
Dr. Pearson, would you like to go? We want to make sure that you get into, that you're able to, we can hear from you. And I love your background celebrating women's history. I love that. Nice.
Yeah, almost. I'm trying to reconnect. So if you want to go to the next person, then I'll go last. Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
Guess it's me.
Thank you.
Yes,
ma'am. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosalinda Martinez. I go by Rosie, as many on campus know me. I'm originally from Illinois, so from the Midwest, moving out here. I don't miss the snow, I have to say that. So a little bit about my own background is that right out of college, well, I always wanted to go for big money, so I thought education, yeah, I think that's big money. But I worked in non-for-profit for many years before I got into education. I worked with teenage mothers. So I had a caseload about 15 teenage mothers, and I did that for a couple of years. I think I was a bit too young to take on that. So I was asked to work at the local community college. And with the local community college, I worked with the admissions office. I also worked with student life for probably about 15 years, both combined. While I was in Illinois, I was a chair of two city organizations, which was the Latino organization, the Latinx organization that brought on Latino events to the community and family-oriented. I brought on Dia de los Niños, as well as a community breakfast celebrating Latino achievement from kindergarten to college. And that was something I was very proud to be part of. I was also officer of another board in the city that offered grants to local teachers in the community. So what brought me to Las Vegas, I am actually a single mother of a 5-year-old, and being Latina, I wanted to be around my family, so I uprooted my life and I came to Las Vegas, where my parents are actually the nanny to my child. And I was lucky enough I believe in the concept of community college and what it could offer. So I'm part of the recruitment office, and I've worked now for about 15 years working with thousands of students in helping them through the process. As I was a first-generation student, and I know what it's like when you don't know what's going on. My parents are immigrants. They pushed education, but they didn't know the information and tools and resources to give me. So I feel I'm that person for those students. Part of CSN, I'm also the chair for All Access, working with undocumented and DACA students. Many times I have those in the community reach out to me and how we could help those students. I'm also a co-advisor for the National Service Leadership Organization on campus. So I'm busy on campus, and again, as Courtney, echoing what Courtney said, is I'm proud to be surrounded by some amazing, strong, and intelligent women, and getting to share what it's like, trying to balance it all without being none of us are super women, but we like to come close. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You all are super women. That's why we invited you. We're all super women. Thank you so much, Courtney and Rosie, for sharing. And now we have Dr. Pearson. I will actually turn off my video. Hopefully that will help with the bandwidth. I'm not sure, but hopefully we're able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So I will skate through this in the interest of your time, and so we can get to the heart of what brought us all here today. Just to give you all a little bit about me, I'm the youngest of three girls born out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't know how many of you know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, very rich history. Black Wall Street. If you haven't heard about it, please read about it. Okay. I grew up on him. My great grandmother was part of that history, so it brought me closer to it. But that began some early foundations for me. Like many low-income families, I can tell the story like many others that, you know, I came from a broken home. You know, my father was in and out of the home. My mother raised three girls and at times couldn't eat. We didn't have water, electric, sometimes not food. But through it all, there's a common message and thread that has remained with me throughout my personal life and my career. That it's not so much about your situations, it's about what you make of your situations. Okay? And it's not what you're called, it's what you respond to. In my early life as a young girl, taught me a lot around my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother. And so coming to you all today, you know, I bring a lot of strength. I bring a lot of pride, but more importantly, I bring the commitment of servant leadership. Nothing that I do is ever for myself. It's always intended and in the spirit of giving back to others. So in that, you know, my mother in her work as an EEO officer for Job Corps, and I don't know if they have a Job Corps here in Las Vegas, but my mother worked for Job Corps. She just retired as a legal analyst from Bank of Oklahoma. And the reason I share that story with you is to give you a taste of who I am by sharing where I came from. But it's not so much as where I came from, it's a matter of where I am today, but more importantly, where we are going together. So as I look ahead and I look at this panel discussion, and I've participated on many panel discussions, but they always leave a lasting impression on me because it allows for me to fulfill my calling, to share stories so I can aspire to inspire others to do great things before we exit or expire from this world. I always share that because we forget about that, and so often we don't realize that no minute is ever promised to us. So trying to maximize on that has always been the signature of my life and what I've done. It's also led me into some very interesting dynamics of being the first. I worked for the Urban League. I worked for the Tulsa Boys Home. I have worked for the Mayor's Summer Job Program as a job placement counselor for low-income and at-risk youth. I walked into higher education being the first African-American in my position, and then topped that with being the first African-American female. So when I moved on to my second career job in Missouri, I didn't anticipate that I would enter that type of experience again, but I was the first in the history of the college as an African-American and an African-American woman in an executive level position, and this is in 2001. So as I go on to Arizona, thinking, okay, now I'm moving from Missouri, Southwest Missouri, to a much more progressive location. Because I was called into my next job at the largest school system in the state of Arizona. I found there too, I was the first in my position. I share those stories not as a brag point. I share those points to say this: enough is enough of us being the first. Okay, we need to be in a group of many leading the way. So I hope through this dialogue in this fishbowl discussion that we can look at not just sharing testimonials, but we can look at what is our next step to have an impact. What's our next step to plant the seeds? So I do thank you all and feel blessed that I'm allowed to be here and just dialogue with you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Wow. all I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you all for sharing your stories. Dr. Pearson, I had no idea that that was your story, but what an amazing story. Um, I'm so full right now just from hearing all of your stories. And I will read it off the question with you, Dr. Pearson. And you know what? I just realized I didn't show my manners with the virtual housekeeping rules. For those of you, definitely, we just kind of jumped into it. We as women know what to do. Just make sure you put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll go from there. But Dr. Pearson, what, giving us your background, what women supported and inspired you on your career path? Because it's such a awesome story.
So, as I mentioned, my mother, as we can all state in maybe so many ways, always has an impression on us being good, bad, or indifferent. My mom taught me the fundamentals, okay? The fundamentals of it does not matter what's going on around you, okay? You can be, you are. And I have just kind of wrapped myself around that. But my mother came from a very strong line of women as well. So in that, when you talk about who's left an impression on me, I can just have the conveniences of looking back not too far at who was around me. And it's not that my mom made the best decisions all the time. She will be the first to tell you that, but I think there was a lesson in that as well. Because we didn't have all the riches around us, it made us look at life differently, and I had choices. I could have actually taken a path to join a gang. I could have been on the streets. I could have sold drugs because, that was one of my other immediate influences around me. But at the end of the day, seeing the way that my mother fought for me and my two sisters to persevere through that, seeing the things that my mom had to persevere through when people were pointing, laughing, and things like that, you just can't replace that. And what really challenges me so much in my career is that people tend to look at the titles that I bring to the table, and they don't look at me and who I am. So I try to enter these discussions as much as I can and say, no, don't look at the cover of the book, because I can connect and resonate with many individuals because of the life and journey I've traveled in. So I give many accolades to my mother for being there and continuing to be there. And I can be afraid of many things, God, but my second person is my mother. I just wanted to share that with you, and I appreciate you asking that question.
Thank you. And I know that you have another scheduled conflict. You have to be somewhere at 6. So I'm going to come back with that question for Rosie and for Courtney. But I want to also get Dr. Pearson, ask her a couple more questions before she has to leave us. And oh man, I'm so sad you have to leave us. Dr. Pearson, I want to ask you another question. And again, ladies, I'm going to come back and ask you these same questions as well. But Dr. Pearson, one of the questions that I really want to ask you because of your role here at CSN, and this will may help all of us who are listening. As a woman, do you feel valued and believe you are paid? Nobody's ever paid their worth, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway. As a woman, do you feel that you are valued and believe you are paid your worth in the workplace? And if you do not believe you are paid your worth, how do you stay motivated? Because that's an issue that a lot of us are having.
So I'm going to do
our worth.
Yeah, I'm going to do a 180 on your question. And some of you who have been in dialogue with me know that I'm about real talk. So let me get real with you. Okay. Yes. I think the greatest motivation that we can have as women going into the workplace, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, is don't set false expectations. I don't chase the chicken. I love that question about, do I feel value? Here's where I get my value. Do I see the impact of my work? But the moment I start placing my value based upon the voice of the individuals around me who may be more agenda-led than priority committed, then I'm about them and I'm not about the cause and the priority. So when I'm in an audience, most often you have to understand, when I go into my roles, I didn't set out to be a VP and executive. That's not what I set out to be. I set out to serve, and it just exposed me to these environments. And so many of times at each of my organization, I'm sitting around the table and I am the only woman or I'm the only Black woman. So I didn't wake up yesterday and realize I was Black, okay? And I certainly didn't wake up yesterday and realize I was a woman. So I know that more times than not, my voice may not be heard. So I always have to adapt and improvise and understand how to switch it up. What's become most empowering for me in dialogue with executives, CEOs, and it goes on and on and on, is that I don't see their title. What I actually see is, what are we supposed to do? Okay. And most often I sit quietly. And what I recognize is that people anticipate that as a woman, as a Black woman, I'm going to go in first and foremost, speaking. So I command the attention by most often sitting back and marinating on all of the exchanges around the room. And once they realize, oh, Dr. Pearson hasn't said anything, I want attention. I don't want them just listening. I want them to actually hear what is being said. And sometimes the best thing that I can do is just sit there quietly so they can understand that this is the experience that you're giving many women. You ignore us. You don't listen to us. And one of the challenges we have is that when we do say things and we're not listened to, then we get involved as an organization in things that we could have prevented had they just listened to us. Sometimes I sit there and mean, it's like, am I really here, right now? So I get it. But in my over 25 years of career in higher education and outside of higher education, again, I don't spend time trying to weigh if they value me. I look back and I become my own check and balance and say, am I making a difference with those that I am trying to serve?
Thank you so much for sharing that. Man, I hope that I should have told people to get a notepad and take some notes, because you're saying some really great, powerful things that we all need to hear. And I do thank you so much for your real talk, because that's what we really do need to hear in me asking these questions. And again, I just want to ask you one more question before you have to leave, because I know that your time is precious with us. How do you manage your work-life balance, given that you are in this great leadership role, and I'm sure you're on a lot of committees and you're pulled in so many directions? How do you handle the work-life balance? What do you do? Are there activities that you do
Let me tell you, I suck at it. So if there's one thing you don't want to do in terms of following me, is that, okay? My days are long, my mornings are early. My husband, bless his little heart, doesn't get much time, but he's an independent person, he'll get over it. So my thing is that when you are called into the world of service and leading through service, there is no clock. The problem is with that is that it becomes a terrible weight, because we oftentimes don't spend much time with ourselves. The one small thing that I try to do while I've been at CSN is that I try to pull myself away from any emails and things like that on the weekend. Just simple things like that helps me. And prayer always is there for you, okay? But when I look back and my family says, Sonia, here's one thing we want you to work on, it is that. And I don't know that I will ever get better at it, but I do ask my family this: in exchange for the time that I'm committing, look what I'm doing and how I'm representing our family, so they can see, they understand that's just going to be. But I'm telling you, I suck at it. I really do.
Dr. Pearson, we want you to at least try to please do some self-care, because that is extremely important, especially during this COVID time, with all of the, not just the physical aspect of it, but the mental health aspect of it. So we definitely encourage you to please try to at least take some time for yourself.
Well, you know what? It's interesting you say that, and I'm sorry to interject, but here's a funny thing. One of my driven career areas, I'm a former licensed professional counselor. So I sit down, consult, and I have counseled people on the very things that you're talking about, but we're also the worst individuals to follow what we actually put out for others. It is what it is, but I'm working on it, okay?
Right. Well, thank you so much. Again, we know that your time is precious, as all of our time is precious. And so I wanted to ask you the questions, and I'm going to follow. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before you have to leave us? Because then I'll go ahead and ask our other panelists the same question. Is there anything else that you left us with so many nuggets? So thank you.
Yeah, I do want to. I never leave these discussions without putting out an ask. Okay. As you all recognize, this work is not easy and it certainly cannot be done alone. If there's nothing more that I can express to you all is to step outside your titles, because the work that you can do should not be defined by a title. Okay, don't be limited by that. That puts us in a box. And that's not where we need to be. We have great minds. And so we need to start utilizing it first and foremost by saying, I will not be defined just by my title. I need your help. I need your support always in the work that we are doing. And so if there's ever anything that I could do for you, please don't hesitate to come to me. My phone number that I give out quite often is 918-630-3573. And when I give it out, I do mean to use it. Text me first, otherwise I won't answer your call because I don't know who it is. It could be a bill collector, who knows? So my thing is I'm available to you all, but we got to be in this together, and it's not just talk. I need us to walk the walk.
Thank you. Dr. Pearson, will you please give us your number again? I'm typing it in the chat box. Is that okay?
918-630-3573. And here's one other thing. I was asked to be the appointed president-elect, received an invitation to be appointed to this national organization called the American Association of Women in Community Colleges. It's part of AACC, American Association of Community Colleges. I hope in that work, if I decide to take on that national president's-elect position, that I can bring many of you into the work that we are going to be taking on to help and support other women in community colleges. And with that, I thank you. And sorry I had to move things around to accommodate this early meeting, but I'm going to get to another meeting.
Thank you so very much. We so appreciate the time that you were able to give us, and we honor you for being with us today. So thank you so much, and you take care. And thank you for sharing your number. I hope that those who she was graciously able to give us her number, we will reach out to you. Thank you so much for that. So thank you for your kindness. You take care, and we're going to turn it over to our other speakers. Thank you again. So again, for Courtney and Rosie, thank you so much for being with us. And so again, we apologize, but we wanted to make sure that we did give Dr. Pearson time to answer those questions. I don't know about you guys, but I feel, man, I got a lot of work to do. Oh my God.
I think Dr. Pearson is everyone's role model right now.
Oh my God, I have a lot of work to do. So same question for you ladies. Who were some of the women in your life that influenced you, that inspired you, that influenced you? Because, you know, we all have somebody. That's why we're here. We didn't come here by ourselves. So Miss Rosie or Courtney, who would like to answer that?
I can go, certainly. And just like Dr. Pearson, my mother has been an inspiration, as well as my grandmother. My mother is from Mexico, and my grandmother was a town midwife. And while others took very traditional roles in the town, she decided to read medical books to help as much within the community. And yes, believe it or not, I remember getting, it's illegal, but penicillin shots when I was a child, when I was getting sick. But they came to her. She was like the sage of the town. And then my mother, she came here at the age of 20, and coming to the United States in the 60s as a woman and coming to family as an immigrant. She faced adversity, language barriers, and then she married my father, and raising a child in two cultures, that culture integration, but always had a very strong work ethic. That is something I remember. At the same time, remaining humble and staying true to the roots. And that is something that is important to me as I raise my child. So that is someone I will always look at as an inspiration for myself. And I understand that not everyone is lucky enough to have a family member to be that person. So if I just have to add that, I always put myself in the position of, again, that first generation student. So I try to be that for young student leaders on campus. If I see someone that needs to be molded a little bit, maybe I have a student leader who there's an opportunity on campus. I have told students go to conferences. So again, not everyone has a family member, and so I try to be that mentor as much as I can for other students who may not have a parent and be as lucky as I was to have my mother. Courtney, I'm gonna pass that on to you.
Yeah, Rosie, and that's what you're doing is incredible and so important, because not all of us do have a family member. And my mother was not a college graduate. I'm first generation. It sounds like just like the rest of the panelists here. And while she was inspirational in terms of showing me work ethic and things like that, she wasn't really able to help me understand the college process, much like it sounds like in your family as well. But when I got to college, I felt pretty anonymous. So I went to a large school and just kind of blended in, and didn't really have anyone sort of take notice of me. And, you know, I did well and got good grades, but there wasn't a person there, like you just said, Rosie, to kind of look out and pick out. And it wasn't until I was a senior in college that I did find someone who did sort of take that on for me, or noticed me enough to say, what's your next step? So at the time I was working at the campus radio station, and the faculty mentor there pulled me in one day after I'd been working there for maybe 4 or 5 months. And she said, you're graduating this year. And I said, yeah. And she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I had literally no idea. And she said, you're going to go to graduate school. And mind you, I was on financial aid. I was taking out loans just to pay for my undergraduate years. I was working as a server in a restaurant. And so I said, there's no way I can afford to go to graduate school. And she goes, we're going to make it happen for you. And took the time to help me with my applications, showed me that there were these assistantship positions that I could apply for that were able to pay for my graduate school program. And that was completely news to me. And so she is sort of that mentor for me. She's the person who said, you're going to do something. And as I've been working in higher education, I remember that constantly. And so when I'm working with students and I see that they're maybe just kind of falling through the cracks, or they're maybe not being noticed for anything other than one thing, particularly when I was working for student athletes, everybody said, you know, how's the sport? How's this going? And when I would say things like, well, what else do you do? They would look at me like, well, no one's ever asked me that. No one's talking to me about anything but my sport. And so to pay attention to students and to colleagues and to people who just need that level of support is really important. And I think that we should all be looking for that person, but then we should always be looking for those people too, because no matter where we are in our stage, we are always able to help someone else and build someone else up. And I shared with some colleagues today a quote that I enjoy and I like, and it really resonates with me. And I think it does a lot of women. I do my best because I'm counting on you, counting on me, from Maya Angelou. And that's something that I'm always sort of thinking about and thinking through. And I know, you know, people count on us, whether it's our children or our spouses or our colleagues. I do my best because I'm counting on you, counting on me. So that's just something to kind of be thinking through, and, you know, let it marinate.
I love that quote, and thank you for sharing that quote. Courtney, I know I reached out to you and said, I love this quote. And so I'm hearing a lot of support, whether it's mothers, other women, whether it's someone else who told you could do something you didn't think you could do. I think that's what it is about. That's why I think we as women, there's no limit to what we can accomplish as women. It's Michelle Obama quote, and I do actually believe that there's really no limit to what we can accomplish. I actually have tons of questions, but I really want to open this conversation up to others who are on this call. So if anyone has any other questions that you would like to ask, I open the floor up to you all. If you want to put them in the chat, or if you want to take yourself off of mute, and if you have a question, please do so. Otherwise, I have tons of questions. So, is there anyone who has a question that they would like to ask?
I have a question. It's not really a question. It's more of a comment, but for both of you, I think it's amazing to find out that you guys are first generation students. I actually am the vice president of the first generation club. So I think that's amazing. I guess I kind of have a question. So I have recently decided to sign up for student government, and Director Atkins has been a just great person to help me with that. But do you guys have any, I guess, suggestions of how to be better at communicating and wanting to be on campus and doing public communications? Because believe it or not, this is like only the first time I've ever like really been on camera. I'm a little camera shy.
Well, Jessica, you have a beautiful smile, and you will be great on camera. But I do have to say, I've worked with student life for about 10 years. And the communication key part, you don't have to always be the front person. Really, for many students, they want someone in the back who's going to send them quick messages, quick texts, because we live busy lives, so you don't have to always be the person in the front. You can be in the background. But the important is that you have constant communication, that don't let that go. And in a sense of constant, you're not overdoing it with the messages, that your messages are intentional. They're succinct, that you get that information out there. And I do encourage you to continue being involved. And one thing, part of student life is like, don't over involve yourself. Select what you want to be involved and make that your passion, and create memorable events with that. So I hope that helps a bit.
And Rosie, I think you nailed it in terms of communication. And then Jessica, I would just add, when you get involved, don't lose your voice. Be the voice. Don't be afraid to speak up if you have a dissenting opinion. That's why you're there, because we need to hear from everybody, all voices in student government. And so don't ever kind of be the wallflower if you have an opinion on something. And I think that's something at this age in my life I've definitely learned, but really, I wish somebody would have been very serious and honest telling me that when I was 18, 19, 20, 25 even, that my voice matters, even if I'm the youngest person in the room, even if I'm the least educated person in the room, even if I have the worst title or whatever, your voice matters. And so it's really important to bring that to the table all the time.
Thank you so much. I love that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mona, but in the chat, Jessica, there's a young lady, her name is Ms. Childers. She says she's part of student government, and she said that is a great way to start your networking and development leadership skills.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Sonia, and thank you, Deidre. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions that was posted in the chat? If not, I have another question for you ladies. And I'm gonna piggyback on what you said, Courtney. Don't be afraid to use your voice, because I think as women, a lot of times we are afraid to use our voice. And I love what Dr. Sonia Pearson said. When she's in the room, she listens. She doesn't go by looking at titles. And I think that is really key. A lot of times we look at people's titles, and then we get so flustered, or we kind of get intimidated. But it's not about the title, it's what the person is bringing to the table. And we should be bringing our servant leadership. What can we do to have an impact? So if for me, I know that is really what it's about for me as well. I have a question for you ladies, and it kind of goes back to the opposite side. So for those of us who may be more boisterous and who do feel comfortable talking at the table, if you've ever heard the term she's too confident, or she's too bossy, or she's too, you know, uh, you know, loud or whatever. Have you ever had that experience where you were told you're too confident, or you are being a woman, you're saying too much? And if you have, how have you dealt with that? Because our younger generation may have to experience that. Rosie or Courtney, and if you haven't,
Sure.
goodness, you have.
So when it comes to those microaggressions, it's putting it back on them, making them seem like, that's an interesting comment. That's an interesting question you just asked. You really need to put that on them and the spotlight back to them, because it's not about myself. And yes, women, super women, we're to be intelligent, strong, but we need to balance ourselves and not to come off as too brash, because that will be called something else. So it's putting it back on that person and why they made that statement. And you'll find that many times when I had that before, they didn't realize, I'm just joking. I'm like, it didn't sound like you were joking. You were making something else. And just leave it at, for me, when I left it at that, letting them know, I know what you're getting at. I don't know if that's helped.
Yeah, and I think, Rosie, a lot of us are faced with those microaggressions and we're not really sure what to do with them, because you have this moment where you're like, what just happened, before you even are able to sort of recognize. I think no one has said, Courtney, you're so loud, but I have had, you're too smart. Why is that a bad thing? Thank you very much. No, it's like you're too smart for your own good, or those kinds of comments where it's like, you really should be put in your place because you are speaking out of turn. And I think all of us are faced with that, where the expectation of me as a woman, or me as in this role or whatnot, we didn't meet it. And so now we've put people out of their comfort zone. But guess what? As Rosie said, that's on them. That's not my problem that you're not comfortable with me as however I'm sitting here with you. I'm too smart, I'm too this, I'm too that. That's on that person. And so we have to have the confidence in ourselves to be ourselves all the time, whenever we can. And that's what's really important, I think. Making sure that we're able to be that comfort in ourselves and not have to worry about what other people are thinking. Easier said than done, I think, for sure. But certainly we're all faced with those kinds of microaggressions and those comments that are sort of sly, but we're smart and we know what they mean.
Thank you all so much. And I wanted to ask that question because for our, if you're older, you most likely, we've heard these comments and these statements. We've heard them. But for definitely our younger sisters out there, I just want to make sure that when you do hear those, know that you are enough and it's not you, it is them. So I definitely want to just state that it is not you, it is them. You are definitely more than enough. You are enough. And what that just simply means is that you are put in that place, in that position, in that room for a reason. And that is to show impact and influence. So thank you all for sharing that. I just have another question, and this is based upon a study that was done. And it just says studies show that men will apply for a role when they meet 60% of the criteria, whereas women will often wait to apply for a role until they feel like 100% that they met 100% of the criteria before they apply for a job. Have you ever had that experience, or do you know someone who who has, another woman who's waited to apply or didn't apply for a position because of that? And why do you think that might be happening?
I'll go ahead and quote Dr. Pearson and say I suck at that. So that's one of those things where, when I'm reading a position description, if I'm not almost 100% of a match, I really just don't go for it. And that's a flaw, just as she was stating about her time management balance, it's that, it's not necessarily confidence. It's more so like, well, it'll get screened out anyway. Whereas there's lots of times where that wouldn't happen. And so I'm not the right person to be giving this advice, because I certainly haven't always taken it, but I'm so impressed by people who are able to kind of progress a little bit more quickly than maybe I would or I have, because they take a shot at it. And I think that's something that we all need to do better at. I think I think Ashley, maybe you put in the chat beforehand that women start at 48% of the workforce, but we're just not making our way up. And this right here is one of the reasons why that's happening. And so all of us need to sit back with that and think, okay, well, what's the harm, right? What's the harm? And so I think that's something that we have to definitely wrap our heads around and try to help each other. If I have friends who are interested in applying for a position, I'm going to say, heck yeah, go for it. So you don't meet 100% of it. Rosie, you should make the effort to move forward. Mona, yes, you should do that, because what's the harm, right? What's going to become badly of it? You might get an interview and that's good practice. You might get the job and you go, oh my goodness, I just set myself forward 5 years faster than I had anticipated. And so not necessarily always taking my own advice, but we definitely want to encourage that.
So I'm going to add, especially being a woman of color, women were already scrutinized, but I know myself, not seeing as many role models of women of color, women in power and women of color, but we have such an imposter syndrome that we feel that we're going to be found out, that if I apply for this position, they're going to know I don't have the qualifications. I know I've had that in the past. And it's finding other women, as Courtney said, to push you, move you forward. And one of my favorite quotes is, behind every successful woman is a tribe of other successful women who have their back. So you need to find that when you're applying. So I believe in this stereotype, men have seen themselves in the power position, so there's some ego with it and history, while women were still fighting for that. So that's my 2 cents with that comment. Thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I do agree as well that we as women tend to I don't know what it is about us, but we tend to build others up. So, like Courtney said, I may look for a job, and she said, "Oh yeah, you can go for it," but she'll tell herself, "Oh no, I'm not, I'm not ready for this." And so, I don't know what that is, but we have to break it, women. We gotta break that mindset, get that out of our mind, and just go for it. And I love what Taylor put in the chat. She just says, I always just tell my fellow women friends to just apply, because they always can learn. They can always learn. So I agree with you, Taylor. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to the question that I asked Dr. Pearson about work-life balance. And I know, Rosie, you are a mother, and I know, Courtney, you're married. So if you can just share, how do you balance, we are so busy right now. All of us are so busy, overworked, extended, and doing our jobs, and then our other leadership roles, and we pull on each other. I know I call you guys all the time. How do you manage your work-life balance?
Well, Mona, I didn't say no to you for tonight, but it's okay. Being a single mother, being a parent, you live with guilt. That's just part of it. But it's realizing, prioritizing what tasks and projects I can do at work, and what I could say, this could be held off until the next day. So for me, family is a very strong priority for me. I have a young child, so I don't want him to see me on the phone all the time. So I take notifications off my phone after a certain time. I do that purposely, carve out time for myself. Balancing work and family can be difficult. And I can tell when I don't sleep well, when I don't eat well. I'm like, uh-oh, work is getting to me. And how I find my balance, and I have my book here, I journal. I journal quite a bit, and being honest with yourself. And I'm going to share this. I'm being honest that I did start therapy because I said, this is becoming too much for myself and something's going to give. And I don't want my child to suffer from that. And there's such a shame associated with mental illness that we don't seek help. So really not only seeking help from professional, but as well as from sharing that with others and say, I'm having a hard time balancing this. And as a woman, we don't like to express that because that's a weakness. And like, oh, you're already a woman in position, shouldn't share that. But being honest with others. So that has helped me try and find the balance between work and family. Courtney, I don't know if she's there.
Yeah, and Rosie, thanks for sharing that, because I think that therapy and journaling and prayer and all of those things are really helpful to many people and important for us, because self-care as a woman just kind of seems to always fall a little bit further on down the priority list, right? Well, I'll take care of myself later. I'll need to take care of everybody else first, and that's really challenging. And when I was at my last job that I'd worked at for quite some time, it was a lot of work kind of constantly being piled on. So when you're doing good work, you're just kind of asked to do more, and then you're asked to do more, and then you're asked to do more. And at one point, it was sort of like the only thing that I did. And so because of family and the thought of like, what do I want out of my life? I felt like I was helping at that job. I felt like I was doing good things, but at the same time, I didn't think that I could continue in that path without completely giving up of myself. And so at some point, you kind of have to come to that realization and make a decision that you have to put yourself first. And that was the time when I decided that it was time for me to make a life change and move and try something different. And it sounds like we're all kind of struggling with that, figuring out where is that point at, and we want to know it before we are past it. Right? And that's really hard. It's really hard to kind of understand yourself. But if you don't take a few moments to reflect and to seek that assistance, then that's when we might go over the board, and then we're giving way too much and unable to balance, and things fall through. So we certainly don't want that kind of thing to happen. I see some folks with their hands up, so I will be quiet and ask ask whoever has their hands up. So go ahead.
No, I'm so happy we have questions. So I do see someone with their hands up. If you want to either unmute yourself or put it in the chat, we definitely want to hear, either your comment or your question.
Hello?
Yes. Oh, yay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for joining us today. What's your question?
Thank you for having this talk.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to delineate, but I was curious as to why is it important to have a certain amount of distribution of females within higher positions of the corporate ladder. Wouldn't it be much better to just have a goal or milestone of enriching a certain amount of females with a skill set, that would give them higher probability of success within the corporate market?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. I don't want to address you without knowing.
I'm Conzello Conzello.
Thanks for being here, Conzello. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's that you're wondering, why do we need to have a certain number of women in higher ed executive level positions versus just empowering everybody to do kind of what they're wanting to do?
Yeah, and then allow them to just disperse within the labor market, and then eventually you'll have people in the higher positions,
Well, I think it's all important, right? So we're not stressing that women should only enter higher education because that's something that, you can go towards or succeed at. But what is important, especially in higher education, is that we do see women at the top in vice president, president kinds of roles, because for one, we are making up a huge number of the education population. So more women are going to college than men right now. And so we want to see what that looks like when there are women leaders of those different colleges and universities and institutions like CSN. Representation definitely does matter. But really what I want to impress upon, and certain that other members of the panel and people here, the goal is to support each other as women to do and strive for whatever goals that they have, and not to say, Rosie, here's what your goal should be. And that's not what I think any of us are trying to get at, but that sometimes we don't aspire to more because we have never seen ourselves more. So I think that's what I would say in response to your question. And Rosie, I'm not sure if you want to answer as well, but it's not really saying we need 40% of presidents to be female. It's inspiring all women to do whatever they seek, but knowing that representation does matter.
Absolutely. Thank you both for thank you for sharing that, Courtney. I'm not going to expound. We have about 2 more minutes, but I definitely want to thank you so much for asking that question too. That was a great question, actually. That was a wonderful question. We have about 2 more minutes, and we probably could have extended this a little bit longer. But does anyone have any other questions that they will like to ask? I just want to make sure that we're not missing anyone, either in the chat or if you have your hand raised. We definitely want to have you ask that question. Yes.
I have another question.
Yes.
When we were discussing about when you guys were discussing about microaggressions, how do you guys make a distinguishing between somebody with poor communication skills and somebody with who's maliciously saying certain types of things, or it's a part of their bias?
And sorry, it was Consuelo Barnhill.
Consuelo.
So that Consuelo, so I apologize. So that you don't make that assumption, and that is why I would put that question back to them and say, well, that's like, why would you make that statement? And just curious where they're coming from. So before I jump to any conclusion, I am going to ask the questioner, that's an interesting statement, putting it back on them instead of it on myself and myself making that judgment. I don't know if that helps.
That's good.
And I always say it's the tone behind where the question, because it's the way a person can ask a question. If you ask me as a woman, like, oh, as an example, you're too direct. I don't know if someone would actually say that to a man. Maybe they might, but it's the way in which a person asks the question or the tone behind it. And so you just got to be aware of that as well. It's the reason why someone may say a statement, make a statement. But a great question as well. Courtney and Rosie, is there anything that you would like to share with people on the call tonight that we didn't get to? Anything that you share?
Tonight is can you have it all? Can you have both the family? Can you have the career? In a way, but you really need to understand and talk to yourself about your own priorities and values. If you don't have your priorities and values and what you want, then the rest is going to be compromised. So you really have to understand, for myself, family is very strong priority because I have a young one. So I have to make a conscious effort of what things I need to step away and what I can't be in everything. I can't say yes to everything. So just please understand that before you could say, I want it all, is what is your all? What is it for yourself? And don't compare yourself to another woman, because we're going to lose.
Rosie, that's a great thought. And I don't know that I can follow that up, but I will. share just one more quote that I appreciate and I think can make a difference here. But from Alice Walker, she said, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And that's something that I think as a young person, as a woman, we definitely need to recognize our own power and then use it, right? Be the voice in the room, as I had mentioned earlier, and go for those positions that maybe you think you might not be qualified for. But as soon as you don't think that you can or don't bother to try, and that's when you can't do any advancement for yourself. So understand your own power and then use it. So that would be my last piece. Thanks for having us tonight, Career and Transfer Services and Mona.
Thank you.
Much. Thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation. And thank you to the students, to all who attended tonight. We appreciate you as well, and great conversation. I just want to say, I leave here believing for me that I am enough, that I'm more than enough, and yes, I can have it all. Um, and I can have it all, whatever that is that I'm pursuing. So I hope that you all leave tonight knowing that, yes, you can have it all. It's a matter of balance, but it's also a matter of, as Rosie said, you know, believing in yourself, knowing that your voice matters. So thank you all so much. It's been a great conversation. Uh, everyone, have a good night. Thank you again for coming. Appreciate you. Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, Rosie. Appreciate you, ladies.